On This Week in Enterprise Tech, we have Mr. Curtis Franklin and Mr. Brian Chee here today. Now, as technology matures and costs begin to drop, 5G LAN looks more like a great replacement for corporate Wi-Fi networks. Talk about that. Plus, organizations continue to look for complete visibility for their applications for the remote workforce. This week, we have Gregg Ostrowski, he's the executive CTO at Cisco AppDynamics, talk about full stack observability and how it can unlock the power of data in an application-driven world. Definitely shouldn't miss it. TWiT on the set.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is TWiT.
This is TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, episode 487, recorded April 1st, 2022. PhishOps. This episode of This Week in Enterprise Tech is brought to you by FlexTrack, the proactive security management platform. Save time and increase productivity with the premier cybersecurity reporting and workflow management product designed to support the complete security lifecycle from assessment through remediation. Visit plextrack.com/twit to claim your free month. And by Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics big, small, and strange. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. Welcome to TWiT, This Week in Enterprise Tech, the show that is dedicated to you, the enterprise professional, the IT pro, and that geek who just wants to know how this world's connected. I'm your host, Louis Maresca, your guide through this big world of the enterprise, but I definitely can't guide you by myself. I need to bring in the professionals, the experts in their field, starting with our expert in enterprise and security. He's a senior analyst at Omdia, and he's Mr. Curtis Franklin. Curtis, how are you doing this week? What's keeping you busy?
Well, it has been a busy week. I'm working on an article on QR codes that's going to be showing up over at Dark Reading sometime very soon. Was with my colleague, Fernando Montenegro, on a LinkedIn Live earlier today. So just keeping up with all the stuff going on in cybersecurity. You know, it's amazing how the bad guys are kind enough to keep us fully employed.
That's true. I actually caught that episode. It's a very good episode. Everyone should definitely go over to LinkedIn and check that out. So I enjoyed that, Curtis. Are you going to be doing that every week?
That's the plan. As long as people are interested in showing up and watching it, I'll be happy to get on LinkedIn and bring some of my other analysts in to talk security. We try to boil down the week in security to one word, and it's kind of a fun exercise.
Very nice, very nice. Well, thanks for being here, Curtis. Well, we also have to welcome back our network and IT expert. He's a net architect at SiFive, and he's all-around tech geek as well. He is Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, it's always great to see you, my friend. How have you been, and what's keeping you busy?
I'm actually having all kinds of fun. Hopefully this works. That is a toy I'm playing with. Every once in a blue moon, I run into a Cat 6 run, a UTP run that is just a shade too long. So that's a GPER. It's a PoE extender from MikroTik out of Latvia. And right next to it, the gray thing is a waterproof housing. So it'll allow me to go 100 meters on each side. And it is a under $100 solution, depending where you buy it, might even be under $50 for both pieces. Wow. And my business partner in Honolulu used that for a fancy dancy fashion show where he had to hide wireless access points in coconut trees and various other places like that. And some of the runs were just too far, so he used a whole bunch of those, and they worked just dandy. So I'm looking forward to using those for the point of sale systems at Maker Faire Orlando sometime in the future.
Very cool, very cool. You got all the toys. Very cool. Thanks for being here, Cheebert. Always great to see you. Well, speaking of busy, it's definitely been a busy week in the enterprise, as Curtis said. Now, as technology matures and costs begin to drop, 5G LANs look more and more realistic as a replacement for corporate Wi-Fi networks. Now, we'll talk about just how that might actually impact the enterprise. Now, over the last several years, organizations have looked for ways to have a complete visibility over their applications in the remote workforce. This week, we have Gregg Ostrowski. He's the executive CTO at Cisco AppDynamics to talk about the full stack observability and how it can unlock the power of data in an application-driven world. So definitely shouldn't miss it. Definitely stick around because we have lots more to talk about. But before we do have to get into this week's news blips. When it comes to processor architecture, you're probably familiar with x86 and ARM, but have you ever heard of RISC-V? Well, when it comes to processor architectures, you're probably familiar with a lot of these. The instruction set architecture called RISC-V is actually out there, and it's a set of computer principles. And unlike other ISAs, it's an open source technology. Now, supported by GNU Compiler, or GCC, having a simple base architecture helps prevent fragmentation while also supporting customization. Now, many companies are taking advantage of RISC-V to create custom processors designed to handle newer workloads, power, and performance requirements like ML and AI. Now, it's actually quite surprising that RISC-V hasn't had more adoption to date. Now, until now, actually, a new startup by the name of SiFive has become the first startup focused primarily on the open source RISC processor specification to reach unicorn status. Now, it's been able to raise $175 million in Series F rounds, placing its value at almost $2.5 billion. Now, interesting, this startup was actually developed by the same people who originally developed RISC-V at Berkeley back in the day. In fact, SiFive has partnered with Intel to help spend more of its $1 billion they've set up aside to help jumpstart their processor foundries in the US. Now, it's been possible for a while for free and open source advocates to run systems using nothing but open source software and firmware. However, finding hardware unconstrained by proprietary silicon from Intel, AMD, and ARM and others has been all about almost impossible. Now, SiFive opened the door for entirely free and open source hardware on which to run Linux, BSD, and other free software when it released its RISC-based Hi5 Unleashed developer board about 4 years ago. Now, this question is, here, with the foundation and the new investment in the RISC-V and the help of Intel, will you see RISC-V phones maybe coming sometime too? We'll see.
Hey, remember Stuxnet? Back in 2010, this was malware that was launched against the high-speed Siemens centrifuges that were being used in Iran's uranium enrichment program. It caused the machines to spin too fast, destroying the systems, and is considered by most people to be the first malware launched specifically against OT, or operational technology, platforms. Now, researchers from Clarity Team 82 have analyzed Rockwell Automation's programmable logic controller platform and uncovered 2 serious vulnerabilities that give attackers an unauthorized way to modify automation processes and potentially disrupt industrial operations, cause physical damage to factories, or perform other actions that could have serious financial and physical safety implications. Those researchers are comparing this vulnerability to Stuxnet because they allow attackers to run malicious code on a PLC without triggering security alarms or displaying obviously unusual behavior. In response, the U.S. Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, has issued a warning that points organizations using the affected components to a detection method and mitigation measures for addressing the threat. Now, there are 2 of these. One of them is a remotely exploitable vulnerability, CVE 2022-1161, and it has a maximum severity rating of 10. That's the highest, and is present in PLC firmware running on Rockwell's Control Logix, Compact Logix, and Guard Logix lines of control systems. This vulnerability is in the way that the PLC stores the executable file, also called bytecode, and the source code, called textual code. It does that in separate locations. This means that someone taking advantage of this fact means that attackers could modify the bytecode, the control code, without changing the source code, which means that it wouldn't be found by most of the mechanisms that check these things. This vulnerability is significant because these Rockwell devices are common in almost all critical infrastructure verticals, including automotive, food and beverage, and oil and gas. As a matter of fact, in the critical infrastructure areas, only power transmission is unlikely to have deployed these PLCs. The second vulnerability is in Rockwell's development platform, and it's a bit less severe because it's a bit less ubiquitous. But it's interesting because it could allow an attacker to change the code during the compile process without the developer knowing it. Now, remediations and tools for finding this are available for both of these vulnerabilities, and customers are obviously being urged to apply these immediately.
Well, our friends at Apple are finally saying they're no longer going to fix iPhones that have been flagged as stolen or missing. Now, this story comes from Mac Rumors originally, and they reported that Apple is finally making it official that all Apple authorized repair centers will no longer repair Apple devices that are marked stolen. With police blotters around the world full of reports of hooligans sometimes grabbing smartphones out of people's hands on the street, the black market is all too full of stolen devices. Well, my comment is it's about freaking time. I used to run an Okidata and Toshiba repair center back in the 1980s, and we regularly checked serial numbers against stolen items lists and would call the police when we ran across a stolen printer or laptop. Well, now considering how automated the iDevice repair world has become, doing an IMEI check against a stolen item list is drop dead easy. So while I applaud Apple to finally crossing this bridge, I also say, guys, it's about time.
Now, it seems like just yesterday, the people gloated about how their iDevice from Apple had very few vulnerabilities, making it ideal for their organization. Well, if my memory serves me right, we actually talked about it a bunch on this show and even said that these types of statements spark a traditional and additional popularity to try to get that holy grail. Well, these days, I don't think there's a month where we don't hear about a vulnerability. In fact, this past week, Apple has released security updates to address two zero-day vulnerabilities exploited by attackers to attack iPhones, iPads, and Macs. The two vulnerabilities here were actually called out-of-bound write issues. Now, one impacted the Intel graphics driver that allows apps to read kernel memory. The other was in the Apple AVD media decoder that will enable apps to execute arbitrary code with kernel privileges. Now, sometimes vulnerabilities like these are only found by researchers, right? Well, but these particular ones, Apple has disclosed actual active exploitation in the wild. Now, it did not release any additional information regarding these attacks. Now, that means if you don't update your device immediately, you're open to such an attack. Hackers are getting faster, and it will continue to be a problem for people. And these vulnerabilities are often exploited before the software vendors manage to discover them, or even researchers report about active exploits before the issue is detected and fixed. Now, that means device owners will need to start doing more than leaning on manufacturers for maintaining security and privacy. Well, folks, that does it for the blips. Next up, we have the News Bites. But before we get to the News Bites, we do have to thank a really great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's PlexTrack, the premier cybersecurity reporting and workflow management platform that empowers teams to win the right security battles. Now, what if you could streamline the communication across the entire security department so that every team member could do their job more efficiently? Sound good? Well, from a simplified data aggregation and reporting to integrated ticketing for remediation to analytics and visualizations for board reporting, PlexTrack touches every aspect of the security management workflow. Gain a real-time view of your security posture by bringing all of your data sources together into one powerful platform where you can triage scanner results, generate powerful analytics and visualizations, assign remediation tasks, attest to your posture, and track progress over time. As a satisfied PlexTrack client put it, we see PlexTrack as part of our strategy to move quicker and be proactive. Now we have a real-time view of what we need to focus on, and I have an easy way of showing senior leadership. PlexTrack serves every aspect of the enterprise security team program with features designed to improve workflow, collaboration, and communication for each role, including red team data aggregation. Import data from all of your automated vulnerability scanners and tools, triage, and report results in half the time. Plus, blue team remediation, you can assign remediation tasks right on the platform or through simple integrations with the ticketing tools your team already uses and track progress over time. And you also have stakeholder communication. Use powerful yet simple analytics to attest to security posture and prioritize issues, tailor attestation and communication to the needs of both team members and the C-suite. Plus, you have continuous purple team assessment. Begin purple teaming or power up your current strategies with Runbooks, the best in industry tool for test plan execution. Security teams of all sizes and maturities can maximize the efficiency and effectiveness of their workflows with PlexTrack. Customers report that they see PlexTrack as a part of our strategy to move quicker and be proactive, that the platform has a 5 times return on investment in a year, and that it gives their security and cybersecurity operations a 30% increase in efficiency. That's right. PlexTrack improves the entire security engagement lifecycle, making it easier to generate security reports, deliver them securely, and track the issues to completion straight from the platform. Book a demo today. Try PlexTrack for free for 1 month and see how it can change your life as a security professional. Simply go to plextrack.com/twit and claim your free month. That's plextrack.com/TWIT. And we thank PlexTrack for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the bites. Now, we've talked a lot about 5G in the past, and the tech continues to evolve and mature over time. In fact, that's actually forcing costs to go down as well. Now, this means that it could look even more realistic as a replacement for corporate Wi-Fi networks. What's going on there, Chee?
Okay, so first off, this article comes to us from Dark Reading, Curt's old company. And what I am going to say is it's a long article, well worth reading and well worth following the links that they have embedded in the article. So first things first, everybody's calling this new buzzword, private 5G. In order to fully understand what's going on, you actually need to go with an older acronym called Cbrs. And if I scroll again, it's got a nice, confusing acronym. It's basically what it is. It's private, also private LTE. It's been around a while, and shall we say it is taking off like wildfire. A couple of years back at the beginning, just before the pandemic really kicked off, I was at the Wispapalooza conference in Las Vegas, and CBRS, which is now the new buzzword, is private 5G. CBRS stands for Citizens Broadband Radio Service. So let's simplify that a little bit more. Basically, it's your own private cell tower. We actually interviewed a CBRS or private LTE or now private 5G vendor called Salona. Mr. Gopal actually was on the show, and he was showing off some really cool pieces so that you could roll out a private cell tower or cell towers for your corporation, so that instead of having, say, for instance, a traditional PBX or traditional telephony system, the vast world now doesn't really like using desk sets. The new age group, the millennials, Gen Z, and so forth, whichever, the entering workforce don't like desk sets. What they like using are handsets, a smartphone. But how do you keep that? How do you keep track of it? If you're in the trading world, you got to track every single call, every single text. So one of the things that started coming up is private LTE or CBRS. And literally you set up a small microcell in your facilities. Might be one, might be many, depends on how big a facility you have. And there's a fairly significant back end. Now, one of the things that Salona showed us was a really cool onboarding system. So if you have an eSIM capable device like an iPhone, literally you just scan a QR code, and it embeds the eSIM, the electronic SIM, into your phone, and it onboards you into the CBRS system. Now, this is what's happening all over. Everybody loves this idea. It gives you a way to control your data flows. It gives you better control over your BYOD. And it actually validates a lot of things that have been happening in the BYOD world. We actually talked to some folks way back about a product called Microsoft Intune that allows you to push policies and things like that to your mobile devices to get control over your BYOD. Well, this isn't quite, a lot of people say, oh, that's really cool. So I can make calls and text and all this stuff. And I can be both my home number, my private number and my company number. And no, not yet. There's a lot of conversations about how to handle that, especially in conversations with the FCC. But right now it's either or. So if you do a quick look, iDevices that have cell modems in them are capable of handling multiple electronic SIMs, which is all very cool, but only one can be active at a time. The world hasn't quite changed, so you can have multiples in there, which would be more than a little cool, but not yet. So here's some of the things that is happening that's kind of cool. One, some fairly big players are starting to get into private 5G, and that's actually Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and Cisco. It's a big deal. Instead of having to sell you, instead of having to carry on multiple cell phones, you can just have one and you flip back and forth. What I haven't seen advertised yet is, gee, wouldn't it be nice if when I get onto my corporate private 5G carrier system, the network, wouldn't it be great if there's something that I could trigger that will automatically forward my private phone calls to my company? Some of the big case studies have been around university campuses. Makes a lot of sense. But some of the big players are people like Nokia, Inseego, Athelnet, Amazon AWS, Cisco, Ericsson, the Azure 5G Core, TWiT, Qualcomm, and lots of others. It was a really hot topic at WISPAPalooza. Now, here's something that I want to toss at Lou and Curt. We're dealing with being able to carry around a corporate asset, and then when I leave the corporate world, it'll flip to the other eSIM in theory and allow me to have my private cell phone. So it solves some BYOD issues. But what else do we think might happen? There's still some holes, like how do we control what happens on the private side of the shop? And from a dev standpoint, so obviously I'm going to throw this at Lou, from a dev standpoint, because we don't have a unified mobile world, is this going to open some problems, especially for things like security? With a private 5G, I have control over the network, so I can, insist on certain policies. But this going back and forth, what do you think? You think we might be asking for some trouble here, Lou?
I think it's interesting because I think that, the network that you're connected to will be a device that has this doability to basically switch between SIMs, but you still have the device itself. So if your device is still, if it's managed, like you said, by some kind of device management defender or whatnot, some MDM, obviously you're better off and you're in a better place to make sure that your device is secure. And then you have other systems that make sure that your device is, now registered and ready to go and secure, and it manages its policies. And then it doesn't really matter whether you're switching between the public or private network, you still have a pretty secure device. But if you're using one device against multiple different networks, and that device is not secure, it doesn't really matter what you do. And now you're talking about installing applications like we just talked about, a vulnerability in the iPhone that could break a hole into the kernel and cause vulnerabilities just by arbitrary applications being installed. I think these types of things will continue to be a risk for any organization out there, no matter what network you're on. And so that becomes it becomes kind of confusing and still hard to manage. Now, the device itself was able to switch back and forth, and that's separated maybe even at the kernel level. Then you'd be more secure. But I don't see that coming anytime soon.
Yeah, it used to exist. VMware actually had a virtual operating system for certain devices. I think it was on a Galaxy to start with. And you literally flip back and forth between a corporate and a private virtual image on the cell phone. It never went anywhere. So I'm going to throw this next one over at Curt, saying, gee, from a corporate standpoint, do you think we're really moving in the right direction? A lot of these young'uns they don't like desk sets anymore. They want to be mobile. So that solves one problem, but what do you think? Do you think maybe we're opening ourselves to a whole new set of problems?
Well, I mean, there certainly are problems, and I absolutely understand. My own company, back around the beginning of the pandemic, I'm trying to remember if it was after the pandemic shut down or before, our company got rid of all of our handsets globally. And we are a company that operates around the world. Now, have we gone entirely wireless in terms of cell phone or 5G? No. What we are doing is using Microsoft Teams as our primary telephone interface. Now, that can be on desktop, that can be on laptop, that can be on a mobile phone handset. So I think what we're seeing is a lot of hybrid solutions. What I think is going to be not as common are companies that specify which network they're going to use in terms of which 5G network they're using. My suspicion is that this is going to be one of those things that is similar to what we've seen in the past. Companies will be very specific when they're talking about the handset or the 5G network that is used for their distribution network, for their manufacturing network, for their transportation network. For their knowledge workers, white-collar workers, it's going to be bring your own. They can manage the cost reasonably well because it's gotten very cheap to simply allow those white-collar and knowledge workers to expense their monthly fees. The rest of it is where we're going to see a lot of 5G specific networks chosen. And the place that I think this opens up a lot of business opportunities is for the integration community. Because face it, unless you're Fortune 1000, even Global 1000, you really don't have the expertise or wherewithal to roll your own and have your own in-house expertise for doing this. It's going to be another third-party integrator or third-party partner that becomes involved and helps you make all of this stuff work, regardless of which service you ultimately have that's in front of your employee.
Yeah, so I'm actually looking forward, and this is going to be really interesting. As far as being able to have a lot of the infrastructure integration, I'm pretty sure that's why people like Cisco, Amazon AWS, and Microsoft Azure are all diving in with both feet. So I should throw out a few notices so people can go and research this more, because this is not a yes or no question. This is lots of shades of gray. It's not going to work for everybody. So I'm going to ask Ant to go throw up the Cbrs wireless FAQ page. This is something you folks might want to look at, especially if you're doing work on a fairly large campus. It'll answer a lot of the questions, especially on FCC regulations. Now, keep in mind, it was 2015 when the FCC licensed the 3.5 gigahertz fixed satellite band. Now, keep in mind, 3.5 gigahertz fixed satellite band. Remember, there were some really interesting experiments done with standard cell phones being able to talk to satellites in that band. So that's kind of interesting. And then 2 years later is when they started having the shared spectrum. That's basically in 3 tiers. It defaults if you're the incumbent, you get priority. But there are shades of gray in there on how you can use that frequencies. And it is not an unlicensed. You have to go through a full set of FCC licensing. And that's why there's a lot of these integrators that will do it for you. Qualcomm's in there, VMware Telco Cloud's in there, Ciclu has been around, Solana, Bearcom, and Telit. Lots of people getting into this game. There's a lot of money involved, but it has the potential for solving some really interesting things. I hear rumors that it's going to be how they are doing some shipboard stuff, so ought to be interesting. Lots and lots and lots of things to look at. It has the possibility to solve some really interesting issues, but I think we're only at the very start. There's security issues that we have to deal with. There's issues on the device itself. Who knows? It's going to be really, really interesting to see what happens. And I'm sure it's going to be a hot topic at WISP America and WISPapalooza in the not too near future. But you know what? I think it's time for me to throw this back to Lou and see if we can hear about another sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Technology.
Thank you, Cheebert. That's right. But before we get to our guests, we do have to thank another great sponsor of This Week in Enterprise Tech, and that's Compiler, an original podcast from Red Hat discussing tech topics, big, small, and even strange. Compiler comes to you from the makers of Command Line Heroes, another of our sponsors, and is hosted by Angela Andrews and Brent Simino. Technology can be big, bold, bizarre, and complicated. Compiler unravels industry topics, trends, and the things you've always wanted to know about tech through interviews with the people who know it best. On their show, you'll hear a chorus of perspectives from the diverse communities behind the code. Compiler brings together a curious team of Red Hatters to tackle big questions in tech, like what is technical debt? What are tech hiring managers actually looking for? And do you have to know how to code to get started in open source? Episode 2 covers what can video games teach us about edge computing. The internet is a patchwork of international agreements and varying infrastructure, but there's something coming to change that changes the way we connect. In this episode of Compiler, hosts explore what edge computing could mean for people who enjoy video games and what is this form of entertainment could teach us about the technology itself. Episode 9, how are tech hubs changing? Well, traditionally, if someone wanted a career in tech, they had to make the move to a tech hub, a city packed with startups and talent, but things are starting to change. The hosts of Compiler speak to a few of change makers who are thinking outside of the physical and social dimensions we've come to associate with innovation. I really enjoyed the edge computing episode. They did an amazing job of distilling down the edge computing and what it actually is and how practical applications can really be made accessible. So definitely check that episode out. Learn more about Compiler at red.ht/twit. New episodes are out, and go and download them anytime, and be sure to check back for newer shows. Listen to Compiler on Apple Podcasts or anywhere you listen to your podcasts. We'll also include a link on the episode's show page as well. Many thanks to Compiler for their support of This Week in Enterprise Tech. Well, folks, it's now time for the guests. Drop some knowledge on the TWiT Riot. And today we have Gregg Ostrowski. He's Executive CTO at Cisco AppDynamics. Welcome to the show, Gregg.
Hey, thank you, Lou. Thanks for having me on.
We're excited to have you because this is a big topic and there's a lot of great information happening and moving around. But before we get to all of that, our audience loves to hear people's origin stories. Can you maybe take us through your unique journey through tech and what brought you to Cisco AppDynamics?
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny. I have a bio that I looked at earlier today, and it says I have 20 years experience, but I keep forgetting I get older. So I have about 27 years experience in technology. I started back in 1994. But it was interesting. I was involved in working for a bank at the time, and that's when the first iterations of online banking started coming out, like 1998, 1999, 2000 around. And then I moved on to the mobile space. So I've been heavily immersed in, I'm listening to you talk about MDM and being able to have dual mode on your phone. I was chomping at the bit here to converse on that one, but I'm not here to talk about that. But I wound up leading large development teams that focus on building applications for transformative efforts, being able to change the way you start to run your business, and that's really morphed on. I really was able to build upon that career and build a very lengthy time of executive leadership where I drove a lot of strategy, a lot of vision. Moved on to AppDynamics back in about 4 years ago. And the beauty about it was, the whole time I was building applications and helping customers start to transform their business. And now I'm in the position of helping them make those applications better. As you're starting to leverage things where you can get that deep insights to the app. And the interesting thing, and the reason why I brought up that online banking application in the beginning, and I think this is really around how full stack observability comes into play. Back then, 1999, 2000, everybody was kind of scared to be able to use an online banking application. It was something that you primarily went to the branch. Roll the clock forward now, and online banking is essential. I mean, you gotta be able to support your phone user, on a mobile phone or a smartphone, browser access, and that's the primary way folks interact with a bank. And that's how it brought me to, brings it right to full stack observability, why it's so important.
Right. Now, I do want to get into that because I think I talked to a lot of organizations. In fact, just recently, you kind of mentioned something similar. I talked to a large financial company, and they deploy both internal and external apps, both B2C, B2B, and they have both on-prem and the cloud. But they continue to manage these things themselves, which means that they're actually hiring more people, and they have application silos for each one of these things, for every one of their application sites. Does this sound very familiar to you? This type of environment?
Sounds very familiar. So it's a lot of customers in that same position. And really, really what the challenge is that, if you kind of look at the last 2 years of the way things evolved, the dependency on digital services and applications has become so critical. I mean, end users are no longer tolerant of poor performance. And they're willing to change banks. They're willing to change applications, move on to something else. So when you kind of look at the way that, we've built solutions in IT or monitoring solutions in IT for the last decade or so is always very siloed, and staying in that approach is actually going to be detrimental to the business. And that's when you kind of think about what the idea of full stack observability is, it's really about knocking down those silos and getting teams to work on a common goal, which is really driven by the business outcome. So when you kind of think about the shift of technology in general, of what we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years with the adoption of cloud service and that sprawling IT architecture, the methodology around monitoring and how you start to provide observability also needs to be able to evolve along with that. So that's where you kind of get that little bit of a crossroads, if you will.
Right. Now, you guys put out a pretty interesting report, The Journey to Observability. There's a lot of great information here. In fact, some of the reasons why people might even want to go into shifting to full stack observability. Do you want to go through some of this? Because I think some of it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, so this is a series of research that we've done over the past couple of years. We started out understanding what the consumer's looking for. That was called, who takes the rap for the app, or, the idea is that doesn't matter what technology is breaking, the end user really wants to have an app that's always functioning. Moving forward, we've started tapping into the IT professional. So we did a survey that we commissioned through a third party that went out and targeted 1,200 IT leaders across 14 different regions. And the things that came up were actually very in line with what I see when I talk to customers. And it's really about seeing that there's a big need for full stack observability. And just to kind of preface that, what full stack observability means to us and overarching in the industry is about having that end user driven or business context driven visibility that shows all the silos tied together, so that when your teams are working, they want to have, if there's a network issue, you want to quickly isolate that it's a network issue, not bring a war room together of 150 people trying to figure out, pointing the fingers that, hey, my stuff is working, so it's not me. It's really about getting that full stack view so that everybody's in alignment. The infrastructure teams, the networking teams, security, your DevOps teams, and the business leaders overarching on who's investing in technology is able to see what's happening in real time. So when you have that alignment and you have everybody focused on a common goal, you're able to then start to quickly triage and quickly prioritize where to target when you have problems that crop up. So like, for example, if your network is failing, you can quickly point where the network failure is coming in. And an important piece too is that with full stack observability, you actually have to monitor the public internet as well. That's where your end users are coming in. That's where your connectivity points are. So you look at it holistically, and it's really about bringing that all together. So through that report, the interesting things that came together is that 85% of the respondents believe that shifting to full stack observability is going to be transformative for their business. So the technology leaders we're speaking to, they see that as a way of making technology really a business driver. And that's what we've seen over the last couple of years. So when you kind of extrapolate that down, it's really, you're starting to see that there's a big interest, there's a big understanding that they need to be able to change the way that they provide observability and monitoring for their overall technology stack.
Right. I've actually been on those phone bridges before where everyone's like, you did it, you did it, you did it, you did it.
Exactly. So the networking team loves first full stack observability, because what's the first thing that always gets blamed? It's the network. I mean, that's kind of like the running joke we have when I talk to customers, but a lot of times it's not. It could be a database, or it could be a microservice hanging that's running in AWS or something like that. But it's really about bringing that all together. And that's what I mean. The network team loves it because, hey, I can prove that it's not me.
So the one thing that's pretty interesting that I talked to a lot of organizations is they are, like you said, they're making things more complex. Their infrastructure is getting more complex. In fact, I just talked to a company that they are now hooking up with AWS event services and event hubs, and so that this way they can fire off events into AWS. And so now they're funneling data and events into that system, and so they need to manage that. And there's other things like mobile apps and other things that are kind of using the AWS side of things. And so there's lots of complexity there. Like, for instance, are the events firing from their software? Are they eventually getting to AWS? Oh, is the network there? Is it, what's the latency? That kind of thing. Is that something that would also help with full kind of stack observability? Would also kind of allow them to see the different layers within there and how things are healthy wise?
Yeah, for sure. So, and you just exposed really what the bigger challenge is, right? As your infrastructure, your topology of the application is starting to sprawl. A lot of cases, you're still running data on premise. You still have a database. You still have, in the banking, in the financial sector, they're still running mainframes. They still have pieces that are tied there. But then they want to start to adopt and provide faster features or better scalability with cloud services. And the thing is, if you take a monolithic app and you move it to the cloud, you're typically, hopefully you're modernizing the app at the same time, but you're breaking it up into many different services. So as you can see, the complexity is growing substantially, and you got to be able to have that full view that showcases that transaction of the flow of the application. So instead of thinking about it from the mindset of, I just need to look at, ensure that this, VM has the right amount of processing capabilities, or this network component needs to have the right amount of throughput through its linkages and such. It's a matter of understanding from that high level on that business transaction view, or the journey that the customer goes through, so that when there's a breakage in one of those pieces, it doesn't necessarily matter where it's located, but you have the means to go out and dig in and start to find out where that problem's actually originating from. So kind of thinking about it from that mindset, like I was saying earlier, with full stack observability, it's really kind of about changing and evolving the way you start to observe things from that top level approach, because that's really what matters when it comes down to business objectives. It matters that the user is able to complete their transactions. And when you can follow that and then start to really narrow it down based on full stack observability, that you're not chasing your tail with a bunch of things going on because of increased complexity. So it's really about making it a little bit much more easier for teams to be able to quickly isolate and resolve where problems are coming from that transactional based level.
Now, we talked about this a little bit. You obviously, organizations that are maybe moving a monolithic application to the cloud, and they're breaking it up. In fact, I was seeing in the report that says that just the pressure of people, I think 38% of the people said that they need to accelerate their digital transformation. So that's kind of pushing that. But there's a bunch of other ones kind of above there. One of them being the pandemic. What's the impact there?
The pandemic is, I chuckle because it really was a massive driving force of transformation. So when you think about it, when the pandemic occurred, what our lifeline was digital services. It was our applications are what helped us work from home, learn from home, take care of our health through exercise applications, your banking apps. The one I love is the fact that I just use my phone now to go order my lunch and I don't have to make a phone call. I can just order my lunch and it can be delivered to me, or it can be, I could just pick it up at the door. So the key part is that the application piece are what really became the primary way that folks were interacting with businesses. And that's across the board. That's across the board through most verticals. Now, when you look at the approach here, and I like to correlate this to, like, you may have remembered the concern around consumerization of IT. Consumerization of IT was the business lost faith in technologists and felt that they had a better set of technology stack at home compared to what they had in the office. That was around 2008, 2009. The pendulum's completely shifted back to the direction of the technologists. It's really in our position to be able to deliver. So the businesses are really now recognizing that technology is what's driving business objectives and business outcomes. So when you kind of put that into play and you look at why the pandemic was so critical to that, because it really came out of demand. It really came out of need of what the end users needed to have. So what happened is that businesses were starting to expedite transformation efforts. And by that, I mean they expedited the approval process, they expedited the implementation process. They started putting things in place to be able to serve the needs of what the current end users needed. And that could be consumers, that's work from home folks, that's learn from home folks. It's a whole gamut that really helped push the efforts around transformation. Now, as a byproduct, that also created the levels of complexity that we're starting to see today, where applications have been broken up into microservices, sprawling out the topology and infrastructure into the cloud services, as well as on-prem multi-cloud environments. So by doing so, it really helped drive the need of digital transformation, but ultimately it also drove the need of full stack observability when you really kind of point it out.
Now, I do want to bring my co-host back in because there's a lot to talk about here, and there's a lot of different perspectives. And I actually want to throw it to Curt as well, because I definitely think there's a security spin on this.
Oh yeah, totally.
Well, yeah, and I agree. And one of the things that you kept talking about, where I think there's a definite security aspect, is the complexity. Because, as we all know, complexity is the threat actor's friend. Because you, for a couple of reasons, and I want to get your take on this. One of them, I think, is just that with all of these microservices, you have many more cracks and connections. And every time there is a connection, there is the opportunity for some sort of vulnerability. And the other is the difference between the way the customer understands the application and the way that the application actually exists on the ground. So, when you're talking about observability, do you find either of these to be points where people need to pay more attention or are trying to pay more attention, and the visibility is being helpful?
So that's a really valid point. So now when you look at the way IT teams are typically structured, you'll have an operations team that's managing performance. They're not necessarily the security team. The security team, on the other hand, is looking at their vulnerabilities, the areas that they're monitoring for breaches and all those things. That's the other part that I believe, the way we built full stack observability is to bring security into the fold. And there's a couple aspects to that. One is, you're absolutely right. When your data is starting to sprawl over different areas, you need to be able to locate it and make sure you know where it's located. So that's another problem that we start to see. It's almost like a new iteration of the shadow IT challenges you have. Maybe a developer creates a microservice, runs it on a host within AWS or Azure or Google, and the teams are not aware of it. So being able to auto-discover that is actually that's a very baseline piece. The other part that we've included is we've worked, being part of Cisco, we've been able to work with the Cisco security business. And we've actually built a product called Cisco Secure Application. Now, the idea here is that you have to take an application first approach when it comes down to threats and vulnerabilities within the application space. So now this is where you start to bring into that full stack observability approach I mentioned the silos before, the network, the security, the infrastructure, the DevOps team. Security needs to be into that full stack observability play as well. And that's really driven by the speed of transformation that's been going on, the elevated amount of risks that are happening on a daily basis, and also being able to bring security into the fold, because the security team is also critical, a part of user experience and innovation. So when you kind of think about companies that are building out the DevSecOps model or the BizDevSecOps model, which is what I would prefer, but the DevSecOps model allows you to start to include security in the overall DevOps process, not just from making sure things are secure, but also ensuring that you're using the latest and greatest innovations in security to simplify the user experience, but not put any additional pieces at risk. So if I could just highlight this in one specific way, is you start off from the very top, understanding where all your data is located, but then focusing on that application first approach that enables you to start to trigger alerts and even automate response, so that like Log4j was a big issue with a lot of our customers a few months ago, and being able to automatically discover where Log4j was resident within the application stream, we were able to inject an HTTP header to block the Log4j library, which enabled the app to keep running, but it remediated the immediate security risk, so that you can still continue to function. The security and dev team were able to collaborate afterwards and properly fix the issue. But it's really, that 0-day exploits that happen when it comes from an app first approach also have to be detected immediately, so that it doesn't explode within the organization and cause bigger issues.
Well, you also hit on an issue that is one of my favorites, and that is the essentially treating every part of the business as an application, where you have your DevOps, your SecOps, your DevSecOps, your BizDevSecOps, your FinBizDevSec, the whole thing. It's tough keeping up with all of the little bits and pieces of functions that are now being spliced onto this, where, as I said, the goal seems to be to treat everything as an app. So here's a sort of a question from the other end of that particular conversation. Is there any group that you see in this whole process that really needs to butt out, to not be part of the something ops process, and is better served by being handed stuff in a discrete, non-agile and non-ops process?
I don't believe the holistic industry would fall into that category. I would believe that there would be some areas within government agencies, some financial services areas that are, I worked in a lot of global areas. So when you start getting outside of the United States, there's different regulations that crop up based on different countries. So I would focus that purely in the areas that are heavily regulated. I think those folks would be the ones that would need to not necessarily be part of a full DevSecOps model or BizDevSecOps model, just by the nature of the industry that they're in with heavily regulation. But I wouldn't necessarily classify that as every organization would be in that type of scenario. I think most organizations are going to be transitioning to become more of a software company than the traditional brick and mortar. And you see that within many different industries that are focusing on technology as their big business driver.
So my turn. This is Brian, and I've got a kind of a bug up my bonnet. I think we need to be really focused on zero trust. I think zero trust is a great goal, but I don't agree that we're getting there in the right way. We've been talking to a lot of people that are talking sassy and saying we're going to get you to zero trust. But they're also talking in the same breath is, well, here's the forklift upgrade that you need to do. I don't think that's a good way of doing things. I go way back, and some of the words and verbs you've been using, I heard from Wang, because Wang was one of the first people I ever architected some work with, where I could assign security and relationships at the application level. Now, we obviously know Wang didn't survive, but I think, and I'd like your opinion on whether you think I'm smoking something, is the journey to zero trust and SASE and things like that, is stack observability, should that really be the glue to, insert these modules so that we can achieve this, but not have to play this forklift upgrade game?
Yeah. So first of all, I'm not an expert on the security side of other Cisco products. My focus is really purely on the full stack observability side with AppDynamics. So I'll give you my take on your response there. Now, when you start looking at security threats and vulnerabilities coming through, my belief, and I think this is others on my organization feel the same thing, is that security from an application perspective it can't be a forklift. It can't be something that you need to really put invasive technology in place that is going to take a monumental effort to implement. What we did is we took our core assets that we've owned, specifically the agents for a Java application or a .NET application, that's enabling us to start to automatically detect runtime level security threats and vulnerabilities. And that was one of the pieces that we just included into the product. You can literally flip a switch, turn it on, and you're able to start to now detect any security threats and vulnerabilities. My belief is that when you start moving down this path of digital transformation, whatever you put in place from a security perspective, it can't affect the end user. It can't affect the end user from an experience, but it also has to be something that's done in a collaborative effort. It's got to be able to bring together the development teams in security, as well as other folks that are in even network teams in security, so that this way you have a collaborative approach to it rather than something being forced into the organization from one perspective or another. I think those days are the ones that are. I think those days are going to be coming to an end here at some point in time in the not too distant future. But I really think that's the big monumental shift, and that's really based on the core fundamental piece that I brought up earlier, is that pendulum has completely shifted towards the technologist, where technology is what's driving business decisions, as opposed to the other way around. I think that's the approach that I think is probably going to be more effective, because simple doesn't necessarily mean it's better, but simple in certain cases where you can collaborate with other teams to be able to quickly implement and quickly get your desired results is where you got to go. But application first security is not your approach to full enterprise security. Full enterprise security is a different topic, and that's where you were going with the comments about SASE and zero-day exploits and things along those lines.
Yeah, that's a terrific answer. And once the chat room stops laughing over me saying Wang, sorry, I'm showing my age here. What I'd like you to do is, where can we go for more information? Just in talking to different people and digging around, there seems to be a lot of kind of gray clouds around what really is AppDynamics. Where can our viewers go to get more information? Where can they go to get started? Where can they go to talk to some experts to try and get rid of the uncertainty and doubt?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have, obviously our website would be the first place I would recommend taking a look at. Go to appdynamics.com. You can enter in your contact information. We would have one of our sales reps that would be able to reach out to you to do demos, do deeper dives or deeper conversations. And there's areas within our website that I highly recommend taking a look at. So we started talking about security. Take a look at secure application. Take a look at full stack observability, which is on our website, which talks about the integration with several different products that we have inside of the greater side of Cisco that enables us to start to build a set of products that integrate together, that solves these bigger challenges. And that's really what full stack observability is. It's about being able to tie the network to the infrastructure, to the applications, to the security side of things, with that overarching view of how the business is operating. So that's where to go, appdynamics.com. You can also look at some of the events we have going on. We have Cisco Live coming up in early June. That's going to be happening in Las Vegas. So get your good luck charm out and come visit us in Vegas for a little bit of Cisco Live and evening entertainment, I guess you can say.
Fantastic. I would love to do that, actually. Well, unfortunately, time flies when you are having fun. Gregg, thank you so much for being here. I know Brian asked about how can organizations get started, but maybe you could tell the folks at home where they can find a little bit more about AppDynamics and maybe even the report that we talked about today.
So the report that we talked about today, which is called the Journey to Observability, it's really about talking about and first of all, the Journey to Observability report is we hired a third party to do this. So it's not a marketing material. It's something that talks about the industry. It's right on our website. Just take a look. It's right on the front page. Journey to Observability. It's something that you can download to see what others are responding about, where they're at with respect to full stack observability, how they see the needs within their organization, some of the challenges that they might encounter when it comes to moving down the path of full stack observability. So it gives a lot of very good, valid items in there that might resonate with the audience when it comes down to looking at what's how to move forward down the path of full stack observability. But the other part too is looking through our website with the events we have on. We have a series of webinars that talk about full stack observability. I believe we just had one that kicked off not too long ago. That's on demand. I personally spoke on one around secure application. And then a few others. A lot of educational materials out there, but by all means, reach out to through the website to be able to contact with someone from AppDynamics that can help you understand further what we do, not just with AppDynamics, but also with the greater Cisco.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for being here. We appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care. Well, folks, you've done it again. You sat through another Out of the Best Dang Enterprise podcast in the universe. So definitely tune your podcatcher to TWiT and definitely subscribe. I want to make sure I thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to my co-host, starting at their very own Mr. Brian Chee. Cheebert, what's going on for you in the coming weeks, or where can people find you?
I'm actually trying to clean my garage up enough so that I can set up my SLA 3D printer. I want to start getting into 3D printing again. And it's a challenge. You move 6,000-7,000 miles from Hawaii to Orlando, and unpacking starts becoming a challenge, but I'm getting there. Now, what I am also doing is we're talking to lots of different vendors. We're trying to find, I'm trying to weave this thread of, I've got a SASE thread going, I've got a VoIP thread going, we've got a Wi-Fi thread going. We're trying to weave these in by getting guests. And you folks are throwing out some great suggestions. So you want to talk, you want to toss things at me? On Twitter, I'm ADVNETLAB, Advanced Net Lab. Or you're welcome to throw me an email. I'm Chebert, spelled CHEEBERT at twit.tv, or you're also welcome to use TWiT at twit.tv, which will hit all the TWiT hosts. We'd love to hear from you. I'm still trying to reach out to the download viewer at McMurdo Sound. Could you tell me who you are? I just have rumors. I used to have one of my interop buddies down there, but they have since rotated up. Anyway, we still would love to hear from you, hear comments. Snarky remarks are always fun. And that's actually one of the reasons why I was trying to schedule Oliver in, because, the viewers love the curmudgeon. Anyway, we've been having a lot of fun. We love hearing from you, and look forward to scheduling all kinds of really cool shows that you people are asking for.
Thank you, Chee. Yeah, it's definitely that time of year. It's spring cleaning time, cleaning out the garages. We get myself as well. But, I actually I purchased a Prusa 3D printer. It's on the way. It's been ordered since January. So let's hope the manufacturing comes soon and I get to play with that as well. So I'm going to get started in a little 3D printing myself. So that should be definitely fun. Well, we also have to thank our very own Mr. Curtis Franklin as well. Curtis, what's going on for you in the coming weeks? Where can people find you and all your work?
Well, I am continuing to do research on cybersecurity awareness training for the first half of the year. And let me say now, if someone watching or listening is involved with someone offering cybersecurity awareness training, hit me up. I would love to talk with you. Adding to my database and adding to the list of people I talk to pretty much every week. I'm beginning to get ready for a couple of conferences that are coming up. RSA in early June, and believe it or not, we are getting seriously into preparations for Black Hat and DEF CON coming up beginning of August. Some other things are going to be happening, and as always, I'm writing a little bit more often for Dark Reading. Hit me up on the Omdia page at darkreading.com. And you can always follow what I'm doing on my Twitter feed at KG4GWA. Also, please feel free to follow me on LinkedIn or even over on Facebook. It's amazing how many places I'm trying to pretend I'm one of the cool kids.
Amazing how time flies. Thank you, Curtis. Well, we also want to thank you as well. You are the person who drops in each and every week to watch and to listen to our show to get your enterprise goodness. We want to make it easy for you to watch and listen and catch up on your enterprise and IT news. So go to our show page right now, twit.tv/TWiT. There you'll find all the amazing back episodes with show notes, the co-host information, the guest information, of course, the links for those stories that we do during the show. But more importantly, next to those videos there, you'll get those really helpful subscribe and download links. Support the show by getting your audio version, your video version of your choice listen on any one of your devices or any one of your podcast applications, because we're on all of them. So definitely subscribe and support the show. Plus, you may have heard we also have that amazing Club TWiT. I'm like part of it right now. Actually, it's a members only ad-free podcast service with a bonus TWiT Plus feed that you can't find anywhere else. And it's only $7 a month. Now, one of my favorite things, like I said, is the amazing Discord server that they have out here. There's a lot of channels, a lot of great conversations. We have fun with animated GIFs that are out there. So a lot of great stuff going on there. So definitely join Club TWiT and be part of the movement. Go to twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, Club TWiT also offers corporate group plans as well. It's a really great way to give your team access to our ad-free tech podcast. Plans start with five members, and it's a discounted rate of $6 each per month, and you can add as many seats as you like. It's a really great way for your IT department or your developers or your tech teams to stay up to date with access to all of our podcasts. And just like the regular membership, you can join the TWiT Discord server and get the TWiT Plus bonus feed as well. So definitely join Club at twit.tv/Club TWiT. Now, after you subscribe, and we want you to impress your family members, your coworkers, as well as your friends, give them the gift of TWiT, because we talk a lot about some fun tech topics on this show, and I guarantee they will find it fun and interesting as well. So definitely share it with them and subscribe. Now, after you're subscribed and you're available on Friday, 1:30 p.m. Pacific time, we do this show live. That's right. Come see how the pizza's made, the behind the scenes, the banter at live.twit.tv. All the streams are there. Check it out. We will do this show live. And like I said, you could come see us make all the mistakes and see how perfect the rest of the guys are on the show. Plus, if you want to watch the show live, you want to jump into the chat room, we also have the infamous IRC channel. That's at irc.twit.tv. A lot of great family members in there and friends and characters that join each and every week. That's right. I did say GIF because, the father of GIF just passed, and, he actually told us how to say it. So we have to follow what he said, right? But definitely check out all the characters in there. A lot of fun and a lot of great tech topics in there. That's at irc.twit.tv. So definitely hit me up. That's right, at twitter.com/LouMM. I just hit my milestone in followers. That was amazing. I definitely post all my enterprise tidbits out there. Definitely DM with me with show ideas. I've actually had some really great messages just recently from people about some shows. So definitely check that out and hit me up there. If you want to check out what I do at Microsoft, you can always check out developers.microsoft.com/office. There we post the latest and greatest ways you can customize your Office suite of applications to do what you need to do to be more productive. You can create macros, you can generate online Power Apps, lots of great things. So definitely check that out at developers.microsoft.com/office. I want to make sure I thank everyone who makes this show possible, especially to Leo and Lisa. They continue to support these Weekend Enterprise Tech each and every week, and we couldn't do the show without them. So thank you for all their support. Also, thank you to all the engineers and staff at TWiT. And also thank you one more time to our co-host, Mr. Brian G, because he's not only our co-host, but he's also our tireless producer as well. He does all the show bookings and the plannings for the show, and we really could do the show without him. So thank you, Cbrs, for all your support. Now, before we sign out, we do want to thank our editor for today, Mr. Anthony. He makes us look good after the fact. So thank you, Anthony, for cutting out all the jibber jabber. And of course, thank you, our TD for today. He's the talented Mr. Ant Pruitt. And you do this amazing show, hands-on photography, each and every week, and I look forward to it each and every week. What's going on the show this week?
Well, Mr. Lou, thank you for checking out the show. This week, we take a look at our video editing module that I started several weeks ago, and took a look at some color grading this time. So we're looking at log video files and making it look really, really good, whether it's in Premiere Pro, DaVinci Resolve, or Vegas Pro. All of these options are available to many people out there. So go check it out, twit.tv/hop.
Amazing. Thank you, Ant. Definitely check that out. And until next time, I'm Louis Maresca, just reminding you, if you want to know what's going on in the enterprise, just keep quiet.
Is that an iPhone in your hand? Wait a second. Is that an Apple Watch on your wrist? And do I see an iPad sitting there on the table? Oh my goodness. You are the perfect person to be watching iOS Today, the show where Rosemary Orchard and I, Micah Sargent, talk all things iOS, tvOS, watchOS, HomePod OS. It's all the OSs that Apple has on offer, and we show you how to make the most of those gadgets. Just head to twit.tv/iOS to check it out.